Let's begin by waving and greeting to our friends joining us via Zoom, and Zoomies waving to us Roomies. Good morning.
Morning.
Welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Congregation of Lynchburg. Here we gather in a spirit of freedom and friendship. Whoever you are, whatever your beliefs, whatever your age, and whomever you love, you are welcome here. As we work together for justice, compassion, and peace, we also acknowledge with humility that our buildings sit on Monacan land. My name is Gary DeVol. I've been a member of this congregation for 52 years, and I'm a member of the Sunday Services Committee. If you are with us for the first time, we're glad you chose to be here this morning to participate in the service for this church community that we love. We would be happy to tell you more about our community during virtual social time following the service or in Drysdale Hall. If you'd like to receive our monthly newsletter and Friday email updates, you can fill out one of the yellow cards in the pocket on the back of the seat in front of you and drop it in the offering basket. If you're on Zoom, you can fill out the newcomer connection form found on the visitor page on our website at uulynchburg.org. You may also wish to join our Facebook group. For those of you on Zoom, please note that the order of service is in the chat on the right of your screen if you're using a PC. If you're using a phone, the link is at the bottom of your screen. As we enter our time of worship, we light the flame of our chalice, sharing these words: "May the light we now kindle inspire us to use our powers to heal and not to harm, to help and not to hinder, to bless and not to curse, to serve you, O Spirit of life." Our opening words this morning were written by the Reverend Scott Taylor. Come, let us listen with new ears. Do you hear it? That voice, so familiar, yet so far. Less a longing and more a knowing, a whisper of something inside that seems to have known us longer than we've known it. Come, let us listen together. Please rise in body or spirit as you're able and join me in singing hymn number 298, "Wake Now My Senses." The ministries of our church are supported by the love, talent, and efforts of our many volunteers and staff, as well as the monetary support of our members and friends. If you found this church to be of value in your life, then I invite you to be generous, as our morning offering is freely given and gratefully received. If you're on Zoom, you can find instructions on how to contribute at the donate link under About Us at uulynchburg.org. Gifts, along with the gifts of your time, work, and creativity, which also sustain our congregation. As together we give generously to support our congregation, let us also commit ourselves to a unity of spirit to make manifest a more just, peaceful, and loving world. It is our tradition to honor the whole of our lives, and so you are invited to share the joy. Let us turn inward in the spirit of prayer and meditation. Sometimes the world outside us can be so loud, making it hard to hear those voices we once knew so well, voices that once knew us so well. And so to silence we turn, to listen for the echoes of memories that make us whole, the pain of others that reawakens our hearts, and the beauty of this wildly generous world that wants us back. Friends, in the quiet of this space, let us not just listen for clarity and guidance, but to become larger. Those voices whispering from deep within are not just calling us home, they are home. We don't have conversations, we are our conversations. We must remember, who we listen to is who we become. What we listen for determines our path. Yes, sometimes the world outside us can be so loud, and so may the stillness we find here companion us and care for us, ensuring that we never get lost. So be it. Amen. This is a service we've done annually for, I don't even know how many years, more than 20, where members of the congregation share their journey.
I've done this before, 21 years ago. Much of what I say today will be the same as in 2003, for better or worse, but here we go. My path has never been a conventional one. My ancestors have been Quakers for over 300 years, and we know that one side of the family came to America as indentured servants to William Penn. I went to a country high school outside of Westchester, Pennsylvania, chose to attend a women's college, didn't date until college, took a job in a Philadelphia bank as the first woman in their trust department training program, and wasn't married until I was 28. Then, just when most women were choosing to raise a family while also pursuing their careers, I became a full-time mother and community volunteer. Although the Philadelphia area has more Quaker meetings than any other area of the country, members of the Religious Society of Friends are a tiny minority even there. There were only 3 in my high school graduating class. What made the greatest impression on me growing up was the people who were members of our meeting. One woman who taught my Sunday school class in high school was very active in social justice work with migrant workers and the civil rights movement in Westchester. She was a member of the Unitarian Fellowship as well as a member of our Quaker meeting. I suspect that knowing her and admiring her may have predisposed me to investigate this church when we moved to Lynchburg. The Quaker religion has a number of similarities to Unitarian Universalism, as well as significant differences. First, the similarities. Like Unitarianism, it is non-creedal, and the Quaker belief that as individuals, all individuals have inherent worth is pretty much the same as the first of our 7 principles. Quakers regard the Bible as just one of many sources of inspiration. They respect and study other religions and believe that one's spiritual life must be based on one's own search and experience, not dictated by anyone else. They do not celebrate any formal sacraments, believing that all aspects of life are sacramental. And like Unitarian Universalists, Quakers have had an influence in our country out of proportion to their numbers. Move this. Sorry. Is that better? Quakers are particularly known for their contributions in the areas of peace work and conscientious objection to war, the abolition of slavery, fair treatment of Native Americans, universal suffrage, prison reform, and the treatment of the mentally ill. When I think about differences between Quaker and Unitarian approaches to religion, several things come to mind. Quakers rely on inner searching and the guidance that can come from a group waiting in silence, a quite mystical approach to religion. Unitarians rely much more on reason and logic and lots of reading and discussion in their search for meaning. Quakers can't point to anything that would parallel the 7 principles of Unitarian Universalism, but they do speak of testimonies, particularly the peace testimony and the testimony of simplicity. These stem directly from the core Quaker belief in the inner light, or that of God within every person. It follows pretty clearly that if there is something of supreme worth in every person, no one has the right to kill another person. Also, because every person potentially has equal access to the inner light, there's no need for an intermediary, no need for clergy to interpret what you should believe. Quakers in this part of the country do not have clergy, although there are meetings in the Midwest that do have pastors. The testimony of simplicity says that since all persons are equal in the eyes of God, our lifestyle should lead us toward a right sharing of world resources and away from huge differences in wealth and consumption. This testimony of simplicity is certainly relevant today when our society's overconsumption and depletion of natural resources, combined with population growth, leads to today's problem of escalating carbon pollution and climate change. So how did I arrive at First Unitarian in Lynchburg? We moved here in 1980 because my husband was hired by John Sherman's section at General Electric. Our daughters were then 7 and 2 years old, and the Quaker worship group here was extremely small and struggling with no young families. I visited a couple of Presbyterian churches simply because John grew up in that denomination and I'd attended a Presbyterian college, but I quickly realized I didn't belong there when I read their little leaflet called A Brief Statement of Our Beliefs. Then I ordered some Quaker materials and tried to having my own little Sunday school with my girls, but that was a pretty lonely endeavor. Meanwhile, John and Marie Sherman had invited us over several times for supper and kept mentioning their church and the fact that one of their friends at First Unitarian, Mary Williams, had for a while attended a Quaker meeting. And wouldn't I like to meet her and also find out more about a program sponsored by the church, EFAP, that provided fuel for the elderly who couldn't afford to keep their homes warm. So when our youngest started kindergarten in 1983, I became a volunteer for EFAP and gradually became more interested in the church as well. Because of my own experiences growing up, it seemed to me that a very important part of choosing a religious organization was finding role models there for myself and my children. At First Unitarian of Lynchburg, I have found an abundance of worthy role models. It wasn't an instant conversion for me. I told you my path was unconventional. I maintained my membership in the Quaker meeting in Pennsylvania for many years, but after about 10 years of attendance and increasing involvement, realized that my heart was here and that I was very comfortable in and committed to this church community. And by that time, John was also ready to join First Unitarian. I find the 7 principles of Unitarian Universalism very meaningful, but I don't spend a lot of time thinking about how to define myself theologically. Probably the closest I have come to finding a name for my theology is ecotheism, ecology as the heart of theology, which some of us learned about a few years ago in a class given by Bob and Connemars. I have asked that the song, Let the Mystery Be, by Iris Dement be played at my memorial service. Sometimes I miss the silent meditation of a Quaker meeting, and I do try to keep some silence in other parts of my life. But I cherish this congregation and the people who are part of it. May we continue to nourish each other and live love in the world.
Trish Cerulli had been scheduled to be part of this service, but she was going to have to join us via Zoom, and I do not see her as logged in. So, I always have difficulty talking about my beliefs because by the very nature of things, words get in the way. Let me start by discussing how I got here. Well, here and here. Maybe that will help me clarify where here is for me. I was born in Valparaiso, Indiana. My earliest memories about religious matters are of the nursery in the Presbyterian church that my parents attended there. The town, Mount Pleasant, no, that wasn't, Valparaiso is not far from Chicago, and it was fairly close to my grandmother. We moved to Mount Pleasant, Iowa when I was 6, where I began attending elementary school, and where we again attended a Presbyterian church. Mount Pleasant was 7,319 people in 1960. Very small town. When I was 11, the family moved to Amherst County near Sweetbriar College, where my father had gotten a job teaching physics. We began attending the Presbyterian Church in Amherst. And the contrast between Midwestern Presbyterianism and Southern Presbyterianism amazed me. If any of you are familiar with the movie, it was a Disney movie, I think late 50s, Pollyanna. Okay, somebody has. There's a scene where I think it's Carl Malden is a minister in a church, and this little girl is sitting in the audience, and he's just thundering about fire and brimstone and damnation, and she looks up, and the chandelier is shaking and rattling. The clip of that is on YouTube if you want to see it. We had gone from a very liberal church to one preaching hellfire and brimstone. It didn't take long for my parents to begin looking for another religious home. They found this church in 1963, and I began attending as a youth shortly thereafter. I didn't know it at the time, but they, at least my mother, had had previous exposure to Unitarianism. In Chicago, she had belonged to a youth group that met at a Unitarian church. My personal religious journey began with hearing the typical Christian stories in the Presbyterian churches, tempered by ideas gathered from readings in Greek and Roman mythologies, which interested me at the time. As I grew older, it became harder to believe that there was a fundamental difference between one creation story and another that would make one myth and the other fact. However, tentative questioning on my part at the Mount Pleasant Church was quickly met with the clear message that we don't question these things. Although that response did keep me from asking the questions I had, it didn't make the questions go away. When I was in my mid-teens, I attended a religious education class taught here at this church by Gene Gilpatrick, whom some of you have been here long enough to know. We did the church across the street, which involved visiting other churches in town, and we also studied the Bhagavad Gita, one of the primary Hindu texts. I was surprised to find myself more attuned to the thoughts in the Hindu work than those in the Christian churches across town. I majored in Asian history in college and also investigated some of the religious traditions at the same time, finding an interest particularly in Zen Buddhism and Taoism. Although I don't consider myself either Buddhist or Taoist, I found inspiration in some of the literature of each. I also find that their belief in the individual's search for a truth and enlightenment fits me. Also, both traditions insist that enlightenment or truth or nirvana must be attained from within and cannot be given from without. They also hold that the search for truth involves more getting rid of obstacles to understanding than learning anything new, and that true understanding goes so far beyond words that words are a hindrance. The first item in the Tao Te Ching states, in part, The Tao that can be spoken of is not the eternal Tao. The name that can be named is not the eternal name. The nameless is the beginning of heaven and earth. The name is the mother of the 10,000 things. Send your desires away, and you will see the mystery. Be filled with desire, and you will see only the manifestation. I have found similar concepts in other traditions, both Western and Asian, and for me, there's a ring of truth in them. Meditation is a traditional means to seek enlightenment, but I haven't had any instruction or practice in meditation, which for a long time made me feel like a dilettante. Then I came upon a small book called The Miracle of Mindfulness, subtitled A Manual on Meditation by Thich Nhat Hanh, a Vietnamese Buddhist monk. By the way, he defines mindfulness as keeping one's consciousness to the present reality. In the book, he describes how to practice meditation in everyday activities. An example of this is this selection on washing the dishes. While washing the dishes, one should only be washing the dishes, which means that while washing the dishes, one should be completely aware of the fact that one is washing the dishes. At first glance, that might seem a little silly. Why put so much stress on a simple thing? But that's precisely the point. The fact that I'm standing there and washing these bowls is a wondrous reality. I'm being completely myself, following my breath, conscious of my presence, and conscious of my thoughts and actions. My reaction to this small book and its emphasis on everyday life was, I can do this. Actually, I realized that I had already been practicing this to a degree. I just didn't have a rationale for it. On occasion, when I'm not thinking about anything particular, I get a glimpse of what I think of as being alluded to by the mystery. At least I feel that I do. Perhaps, ironically, more often than not, these glimpses occur when I'm riding my bike, which is my main form of exercise. The activity has a way of allowing me to be in the moment. There's something about being halfway up a 3-mile climb, 40 miles into a 100-mile ride, and having a leg cramp that really focuses the mind on the present. More recently, I've considered Native American religions, although more from a historical and anthropological perspective. Somehow, their ability to live for thousands of years in harmony with the natural world on this continent makes a sharp contrast with the few centuries of European settlement and the devastating effect on the environment we've experienced from the apparent need to exploit nature rather than live in harmony. So where does that leave us? I have Christian, Buddhist, and Taoist influences, but I'm not any of the three. If I have a customary practice, I think of it as more Buddhist than anything else. There's something beyond what we perceive in our normal lives, but it's possible to connect with it. This connection is most likely to happen when it is sought the least. Thank you. Please rise in body or spirit as you're able and join me in singing hymn number 352. As our service draws to a close, we extinguish the flame of our chalice as we say these words together. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. Our closing words this morning were written by the Reverend Emily Gage. May we open our hearts and minds to one another and the world. May we let ourselves be changed by the stories around us. May we deeply listen and be deeply listened to, and be held in silence and love. And so may it always be. Oh, sorry about that.